Hello and welcome. Today we are really going to dive deep into a tool that is, frankly, essential for any of us working with premium intraocular lenses, and that's the Defocus Curve. It's truly the key to understanding how these amazing new IOLs actually perform in the real world, and it takes us way, way beyond the old-school eye chart.
You know, for so long, the pinnacle, the absolute goal, was hitting 20/20 vision. But let's be honest, with today's incredible presbyopia-correcting IOLs, that one single number just doesn't cut it anymore. It's only a tiny piece of the story. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is this: how do you actually map out an IOL's entire visual journey, from seeing a road sign way down the highway all the way to reading a text on a smartphone? Well, that's exactly the challenge we're going to tackle.
And that really brings us to the first big question, the why. Why do we even need something more than the good old Snellen chart? I mean, it's been the bedrock of what we do for over 100 years. But the simple fact is, our IOL technology has just completely outpaced it. We absolutely need a better, more detailed, more continuous way to see how these lenses are really performing.
And the solution, the answer to that why, is the Defocus Curve. I want you to think of it less like a single snapshot of vision and more like a complete, panoramic visual landscape. It's this fantastic method that maps out a patient's functional vision across a whole range of distances. It gives us a profile, a signature, that truly shows us what they can do in their day-to-day life.
Okay, so that's the why. Now let's get into the practical stuff, the how. How do we actually perform this powerful test in the clinic? Let's walk through it step by step, because the standardized method is what makes these curves so reliable and so repeatable from patient to patient.
The whole process is actually beautifully simple. First things first, you have to establish your baseline. You correct the patient for their absolute best distance vision. This becomes your 0 point, and it's so crucial because it lets you evaluate the IOL on its own without any leftover refractive error muddying the waters. Then you start introducing a series of simple spherical lenses, usually in half diopter steps, and you just measure the vision in logmar at each and every step. And finally, you plot those points on a graph, acuity versus defocus, and just like that, the lens's unique performance signature starts to appear right before your eyes.
And the magic behind how this all works? Well, it's one of the most fundamental formulas in all of optics. The power of the lens in diopters is just the inverse of the distance in meters. So by putting these negative lenses in front of the patient's eye, we are perfectly simulating what it's like for them to look at an object up close. It's a simple, elegant way to mimic real-world vision.
And this right here makes it all tangible. A -1.5 diopter lens, that's the same thing as looking at a computer screen at about 67 centimeters. That -2.5 lens, well, that's like reading a book at a very comfortable 40 centimeters. You see? The defocus curve is what translates these clinical measurements, these diopters, directly into the functional distances that our patients actually care about.
All right, so we know how to make the curve. Now for the really fun part. The interpretation. What are we actually looking at? Because each and every category of IOL has its own distinct visual signature, a totally unique profile that tells us the story of how it was designed to work. First up, the old classic, the monofocal. Its signature is just unmistakable. You see that incredibly sharp single peak right there at the 0 diopter mark for distance? This tells you exactly what this lens does best. It gives absolutely fantastic distance vision, but, and this is a big but, look at that steep drop-off. As soon as you move into intermediate or near, the visual acuity just falls off a cliff.
Now let's compare that to one of the newer, advanced monofocal plus IOLs. The difference looks subtle on the graph, but believe me, it is clinically huge. See how the peak is just a little bit wider, a little less steep? That small broadening of the curve translates directly into better functional vision for intermediate tasks. It gives patients that little bit of extra flexibility, maybe to see the dashboard in the car or a price on a supermarket shelf.
Now we get to the extended depth of focus, or EDOF lens, and its signature looks completely different. Its whole purpose is to create one long, stretched-out focal point, and the result is this classic flat, plateaued curve. So instead of a single sharp peak, you get this beautiful, continuous runway of high-quality vision that goes all the way from distance smoothly through the intermediate range.
And finally, we have the trifocals and multifocals. Now these lenses are engineered to split light into several very specific focal points, and you can see it perfectly in their defocus curve. Look at that. You can literally see the multiple peaks, one for distance, another for intermediate, and a third one for near. Each and every one of these technologies leaves its own unique fingerprint right there on the graph.
But just being able to look at the peaks and valleys, that's really just the beginning.
To truly master the defocus curve, we've got to go a level deeper. We need to move into more sophisticated metrics that can take all this complex data and boil it down into real, actionable insights for our clinic.
So this brings up a really critical question, one we face all the time. You're trying to compare two different excellent lenses, or maybe you're counseling a patient on what to expect. How do you go beyond just sort of tracing the curve with your finger and saying, this one looks a little broader? How do we actually put a number on the total visual performance?
The answer is a beautiful metric called area under the curve, or AUC. It's so powerful because it's a holistic measurement. It doesn't just look at 1 or 2 points. It integrates the total visual performance across whatever range you define. It captures both the quality of the vision, that's the acuity level, and the quantity of the vision, that's the range of focus.
And this image just illustrates the concept perfectly. First, we define a threshold for what we consider good functional vision. Let's say it's 0.2 logmar, or about 20/30. The area under the curve is literally all of that shaded space where the IOL performs better than that line. So what does that shaded area represent? It's the IOL's total functional visual space. And the takeaway is simple. A bigger area means a better overall performance.
Now, a related idea, and it's just as powerful, is something called acuity reserve. Think of it like this. It's the surplus vision a patient has for a specific task. If you need 20/40 to read your email, the acuity reserve tells you how much better than 20/40 your patient is actually seeing. It answers the question, do they have just enough vision to get by, or do they have a really comfortable buffer? It's a fantastic way to think about real-world visual comfort.
And this is exactly why all of this matters. As this quote really nails, AUC gives us a hard number, a quantifiable metric that we can use to match a lens's performance to a specific patient's priorities. This isn't just about looking at graphs anymore. This is about using data to make truly personalized IOL selections.
Okay, so we've covered the why, the how, and the what. The last step, and the most important one, is putting it all into practice. So, now what? What are the big takeaways for you and your clinical workflow?
The first thing to remember is that as powerful as the defocus curve is, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's one very important piece of a much larger puzzle. You always have to consider other critical things, right? Like the MTF data from the optical bench for contrast, or how the lens performs in dim light when the pupil is large. And of course, you absolutely have to consider the final binocular curve, because that's what the patient actually sees and experiences every day.
And that brings us to the final and I think most crucial takeaway. The defocus curve is not just a research tool. It is a clinical verification tool. So once you start using a new IOL in your practice, the absolute best thing you can do is document the defocus curve in your first set of patients. It is the ultimate way to confirm, with your own hands and your own patients, that the lens is actually performing the way it's supposed to. It's the ultimate confirmation that it's delivering on its promise. So let me leave you with this question. What story will your next IOL tell?